minute.
No.
I'm not gonna lie, ever since we received the confirmation of the Fated King, there is always a possibility of the Destined King. And that plot device aside, I think this, in my opinion, has been one if not the fastest support that any brand new deck in the format has received, and it is an incredible support. Despite the analogy I made earlier with Magikarp, it is definitely not Magikarp. The potential of Levidras support is insane. But before we get into talking about the new support, let's look back just a little bit and see what is things that hold back Levidras first, so that we roughly know what has improved in Levidras. So to put it simply, for Levidras, he generally has a lot of good things going for. Decent board recovery with his own order and Huli. Infinite Eye Marker is the good inheritance of Force Marker without being broken, and he does have a lot of toolbox, but he does have a few problems. The first and foremost is that he has to go seconds to access the full power of his toolbox, with Anogas and Huli require 3 different infinite marker to fully unlock that skill. And on top of that, the deck is generally extremely energy hungry thanks to the use of Manticide on top of Anogas, and it is a very slow to set up deck because you can only set 1 marker on each field at the time. Overall, I would say the biggest draw that held Levidras back was the fact that he has to go second. But with the new support, I think it is no longer a detriment. But before we get to the reason why, let's talk about more of the relevant toolbox in this booster. And unfortunately enough, all of them are the double R's. The whatever grade 3 that was revealed in the show and in the review, I'm sorry, I feel that card is a little bit useless. Especially considering the first card we're gonna be talking about is simply just a much better grade 3 to run in Levidras right now, and that is Knight of Formosity, Shamet. Shamet has 2 skills where while she's in the drop zone, if there are 3 or more of your infinite eye markers and you do not have a rearguard with the same name as this unit, you may Soul Blast 1 and call this card back to rearguard circle from drop zone. Then auto on rearguard, when this unit attack, if your infinity eye marker is in the same column as this unit, you can retire another rearguard. This unit get additional 10k until end of that battle, and at the end of that battle, you may retire this unit and draw a card.
Why are you like this?
This card is essentially a version of an inlet Pulse Dragon for Levidras, as not only this is essentially always +1 to Levidras board, but also being a very strong attacker on top of the infinite marker. And if you have additional booster behind her that has infinite marker, you are reaching a number that Night Rose could have wished for just 1-2 turns earlier. And the only unfortunate part for her, at least in my opinion, is the grade.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
I know this doesn't make sense as of now, but as we go through all of the support, you will start to see the problem. But before that, let's go through another good support for Levidras that I personally don't find it useful, but it does have its use in a certain build, and that is Inquisitive Squirrel. This unit only has 1 skill where once per turn at the end of battle this unit boosted, you may Soul Blast 1, move this unit into an open back row rearguard, and if you did move to a rearguard circle with infinite eye marker on it, stand this unit and it get 5k until end of turn. Having a less needed to have a rearguard is actually a good thing, but the problem with this card, at least in my opinion, is that if you decided to go for a more revive based build, it doesn't really have a place in that version of a build, because with the right combination of cards, you literally can just build back your entire board in 1 single turn. And unfortunately, this card is slightly in the way, but I have to acknowledge it.
There's nothing wrong, Captain.
Especially considering the flexibility that the brand new version of Levidras, Destined King of Infinity, Levidras Empireo, actually brings for the deck. This unit has 3 skill but no divine skill. As constant while on Vanguard circle, this unit is also regarded as Destined 1 of Infinity Levidras, and during your turn, this unit get additional 5k for every OG Levidras in your soul and every single drop of that divine skill. Then act once per turn, counter blast 1 or put a card from your hand into soul, choose 2 of any player's rearguard circle, put infinite eye marker on each of them. If you put grade 3 or greater card with Levidras in its name for its cost, you can put 3 instead of 2. The last skill I'm not gonna go through heavily because it's exactly the same as the original Levidras.
It was perfect. Perfect.
So what does this shiny Magikarp looking version of Levidras actually bring to the deck? Well, flexibility. For one, this does get the original skill of Levidras, so that means that you do not really lose too much, especially one of the skill is exactly the same. But what does this card do better is the fact that now you no longer need to go second to get the full access to your toolbox, because as long as you have a Levidras in your hand, you will always be able to get 3 markers, which essentially unlock most of your cards toolbox. Not most, all of them actually.
Incredible.
And on top of that, it is an alternate cost skill. You can either pay counterblast 1 or put a card from hand into soul, not only fixing the soul issue, but also reduce the counterblast needed for the skill, allowing you to run more counterblast in a deck with cards like Saphira, more Huli in general, and some other card that stuck here hate in the comments most likely will be able to do so. I'm not one, so that's all I can think of at the moment. And on top of that, the additional power you can get for every OG Levidras in your soul is really helpful, because Levidras is the only card on the board that cannot take advantage of Infinite Eye Marker, so having a way to gain power on this zone is actually a good thing. But it does have an issue. You need Levidras in your hand. And I'm not saying this is impossible, because based on my testing, it is very consistent enough, but the chance is there, and the moment you cannot get any Levidras in your hand, your deck play worse than the original Levidras, because at least the original version doesn't have that high of a requirement, but this version does kind of force you to have that Levidras in your hand, which does lead to additional problem of overrunning your deck with grade 3s.
Vanguard はグレード3に始まりグレード3にて終わる。
You see, aside from the 4 copy of Imperial, you do have to run a few copy of original Levidras. On top of that, you do run a few more grade 3 cards like Inlet or Shamet, which fortunately enough does run at a lesser amount, but the problem still exists. So because of that, the defense of the deck is generally weaker in terms of like the shield value in your hand, but at the same time, because of the fact that you can put Infinite Eye Marker on any player Reka Circle, means that you technically can literally just swarm your opponent board with Infinite Marker to fully utilize the defensive part of Levidras. So I would say it's a good trade-off.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
So, does Imperial actually fix the issue that original Levidras has or not? The answer to that is 100% yes. Now that the marker generation is faster enough with enough restriction, it allows the deck to go full power regardless of whether you're going first or second, as now you have access to entire toolbox of Levidras in general. And on top of that, you are also able to utilize your Infinite Marker in a much more effective way, because of the fact that you no longer have to restrict yourself on putting marker on your field, thanks to the fact that you no longer have to rely on putting marker on your own field with the original effects. And also because of the fact that this card does open up a counterblast slot, it also allows you to run certain generics that work extremely well with the deck, allowing you to essentially do a combo where Levidras can build its entire board with a single card. But despite some of the issue has been fixed, there are a brand new issue coming in. Fortunately enough, it's not as bad as the original, as having Levidras in hand is a very important key, because you want to generate your marker as fast as possible to 3 markers. And because of that, you might have to sacrifice your Peasant Rise sometimes, and at the same time, your defense is slightly weaker purely because of the lesser shield value. And the deck is still energy heavy, because you are still wanting to run Anogaster at 4 copies, and depend on what right line you go for, you do use more energy. Like a good example for this is of course Multi-Side Dragon, which I do still prefer to run because of the fact that it helps to search for Levidras in a much wider circle, at least in my opinion. And despite not needed as much soul as the original, you do have to manage your soul properly, because one poor management of soul, you might run into the situation where Imperial will lose some power because of how you play your deck. But that's Imperial. The upgrade that Levidras received in one booster like Big Bang Dragon, and I would say like Big Bang Dragon, it improved the deck drastically to an extent that I would say it is gonna be one of the meta trade in the CBT05. But that's just my opinion. Do leave down in the comments below, and yeah, that's all I have for today. Take care of yourself, don't forget to collect that sub, and join member for some cool perks. And this is Mac Mechanic signing out.
Boom, boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom.